Welcome to this episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess. I'm Aric.
And I'm Angie.
We are married with a ton of kids.
We have 6 kids total. He has 3 and I have 3.
My name's Hallie and I love riding horses.
I'm Lexi and I love agriculture.
My name's Carter and I love eating.
My name's Chase and I love lifting weights.
My name's Summer and I love spending my parents' money.
I'm Dane and I love baseball.
Our show is about our blended, blessed, and always a mess life. And our hope is if you find yourself in the same situation we are in, that by sharing our story, all the fun and all the mess, the challenges we are experiencing, it will give you some inspirations, laughs, and community, knowing you are not alone in this mess.
We appreciate you spending time with us. Let's dive in.
This episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess is sponsored by the children's book Feathers Matter. As our kids grow up, they face challenges in their life, and knowing their self-worth and their value is crucial to face the headwinds. Purchase this beautiful story to read to your kids and grandkids and start the conversation with them at a young age. They are worthy, they matter, and their feathers matter. You can find a link to order on our Blended, Blessed, alwaysamess.com page. Mention code #blessed for an autographed copy. Welcome to this week's episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess, where I hope that today we're able to talk about something that we're all going to have to deal with, but we're going to visit with my good friend, Pastor Shay Roush of The Crossing here in Columbia, who walked Hallie into the arms of Jesus with us all the way through the tragic news of the shooting and days in a hospital. And in the room, the only person that was not family with Hallie when she passed and went to be with Jesus was Shay. And so he's here today just because I've walked this journey with Shay more than once over the years. And you might have noticed Angie's not here. So it's been a busy weekend. You've noticed the podcast is delayed. We've got twins' birthdays turning 15. She's out running twins in Jefferson City right now, and which we have people that listen in India. That's about 30 minutes from where we live. So Shay is one of my very best friends. He's walked the last 15 years of my life with me in my journey with Christ. He's walked with me in times that have been good, in times where I've been hard-hearted, in times where I've let people down, and much like Jesus, Shay's always been there to pick me up. So I've loved our relationship. I've loved, more than anything, I've said this before, I've told your wife this because I think it's the best compliment that I can give you. You know, pastors all have certain gifts. Some are to preach, some are to teach, some are to do other ththings, and you do many things well, but I really believe that God gifted you with the ability to walk people into the arms of Jesus. And I have said that to you, and it's a gift that you have of comfort in the worst of human times. And so I just thought we could kind of talk about that today. And I told Angie this morning, we were leaving church, I said, I'm kind of a little bit already tight in the chest because I know I have to go back into that room, right, where we were all together and walking Hallie into Jesus' arms. And that's tough, right? I try not to go to that room very often, but there's also healing in that. It's one of the things you've taught me over the years. So
yeah.
With that being said,
I just want to say, hey, Aric, it's great to be with you. Appreciate your friendship over the past 15 years. It's a little bit of a shame that our better halves are not on this podcast, and it's me and you. So I hope your viewership or listenership doesn't go down. But,
so we've had Lynn on. You remember when we had Counselor Lynn Roush on? She had a 2-part episode. I said to her, she goes, "How long did this last?" I said, "Well, your wife was on for 2 episodes. We had so much to talk about." But Shay and I are going to try to keep it to one thing today. And you know, it's true, right? In life, it's death and it's taxes. And for a long time, I was really scared of death. And then the more I've gotten to know you and walk through faith, and just, it was when my good friend Teresa Davis passed away in 2014, and you helped walk through that.
Yeah, I remember that.
And she had gotten cancer unexpectedly, and she died like 12 days later. It was really fast. And I remember you just saying to me, like, when you die, you just go right into the arms of Jesus. I never thought about that. I guess I was just scared to die. What do you think most people think about, and how have you explained that to me so well over the years that now I just got it? I'm not afraid to die anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a common experience that people, they don't want to think about death. And not that we should be, morbid and going around all the time. It's always on our mind, that sort of thing. But we live in the real world, and it's a part of life. It's not a natural part of life. It's not the way things were supposed to be. But a lot of people, as they think about that, it brings up a lot of fear in their life. But there's some promises that we're given in the Bible. And there's some passages that talk about, for example, that when we grieve, when we lose someone in our life dies, that we don't grieve as people who don't have hope, because we know that the grave is not all there is at death. And so I as a Christian pastor, believe that those who have faith in Jesus and follow him as their Lord and as their Savior, as their King, that they've been following him in this life, and then when they die, they pass right on and realize that he's always had them. And so there's a comfort, and it's interesting because I think we fear that, but it's really good to be with Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. I think we.
I have thought for several years now, and again, I didn't for a long, long time, and now I've thought, man, it's going to be good to be with Jesus. And for some reason, over the course of our friendship and watching you in those moments as people know they're going to die, right? And the first time I did that with you was with Teresa, and we were in the hospital, and just the way that you prayed with her and for her. And there have been times that my mom has been ill and my mom's still alive, but you have prayed with her, and it's so comforting. And obviously, again, you were with us within an hour of us getting the call that Hallie had been shot, and us letting our small group know, which, you're a part of, you and Lynn, were in the hospital with us like within an hour, and you were there for over 48 hours. You walked that walk with us. You were in the room when you needed to be. You were not there when you needed to step out. But again, you were the guy then that prayed over Hallie before the honor walk. You prayed for her again in the final room, but when they took the monitors off. And what goes through your mind? Because you do it so well. How do you bring comfort to people in that time of need? You've done it for me more than once. What comes over you? It's just God just working through you, I assume, in some way.
Yeah, I think I just want people to know the reality, what is true in the midst of those times. And I found over the years, just your faithful presence. Sometimes, we want to call a pastor to be with us in the midst of those times. But I've found that even good friends that can just be there, and people are always worried about, what am I going to say? Am I going to say the wrong thing? And I always tell people, I wouldn't worry about it. I just think your presence with people in the midst of those kind of life-changing moments is what's the most important. I remember, Aric, when my dad died, and I remember at his funeral, I remember just good friends coming. They didn't need to say anything to me, but just them being there, just telling them, me that they love me and that kind of thing, it meant the world to me. They didn't need to say anything to me. But also, I do recognize that my role as a pastor is I just want to communicate truth to people. And the truth is that, one of the promises that God gives us is that he's with us. It's coming up the Christmas season, and maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, that's what we celebrate at Christmas is God becoming with us. And he is with us in the midst of those moments. And so when I'm meeting with somebody going through some sort of tragedy or at the hospital, I want to just encourage them, look, God is with you. This didn't catch him by surprise. He's in control. He loves you, and he's committed to you, and he's sovereign over this situation, and therefore you can trust him. You might not understand why, but you can trust him in the midst of this, and you can lean upon his promises during those times. And so I just want to be that faithful presence to remind people of what is true.
You have said that to me over the years, and it is always in like the hardest times when it really makes sense, and being in the hospital and you just reaffirming. For us, that was the worst surprise, right? I mean, we didn't expect to get a call that our daughter had been shot, and then within an hour, them telling us that there was really no hope. And so the shock and the awe and the surprise and the bomb has gone off in our life at that point. Your reminder that this didn't surprise God. He's still in control.
That's right.
That's comforting.
It is. It is.
Now, we don't understand, as you said. Again, you say all the right. You know what you're saying. Like, you've done this. You're right. We don't understand it, but God's still in control.
He's still in control, and we don't know the why. We don't know the why of why he does certain things. I think hopefully when we get to heaven, we'll be able to ask him those questions. But I think it'll become clear to us.
Yeah, I almost think we won't have to ask. We'll just know.
Yeah, this wiser plan that he has. But, we're never we're never promised the why. We might see good things that come about as a result, and I can see why this happened as a result of this and that sort of thing. But I like to, point people just back to the Bible. Think of the story of Job, probably the person who suffered the most of any other person on this earth. He lost everything, lost all of his possessions, lost his family, lost his kids, broke out in sores. The only thing he didn't lose was his wife. God allowed it. And she wasn't much help. She wasn't much comfort to him. She said, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? Because you must have done something to really make God mad. But the reality is that, and the Bible says Job was a righteous man. God wasn't punishing him in any way. But Job never knew the why. Job never knew this conversation that had taken place between Satan and God, where God said, where Satan says, let me take away all the gifts of his life. And that's the only reason why Satan said to God, the only reason why Job worships you is because you give him good things. Let me take those away and let's see if he worships you. And Job did. Job did worship God, even when Satan was allowed to take those things away. So all this was happening in Job's life under God's direction. It wasn't Satan who was in control of this. It was ultimately God. But Job never knew about this conversation that had taken place in the heavenlies. And he never knew the why. And in fact, through his entire life, he was never told why. But I think when we, like Job, when we get to heaven, we'll see how the mosaic, how the picture is being painted, how all the small pieces fit together. And it's a beautiful picture that God is painting. And I think we'll know then. But we can trust God in the meantime.
Angie and I had that exact conversation coming home from church this morning. We're never going to know the why as to how, why did God take Hallie when he did at 20 years old. But what I did see is if the story is that force, and I'm not saying it is, but if the story was that Satan said, God, let me take her and see what happens. My wife has poured herself into her relationship with God in the last 12 months in a way that I've never seen. And I'm really proud of her in that regard. I mean, because she has trusted in the hard times, and she has believed that God's plan. I mean, she said to me today, she goes, I really believe he saved her. Like she was going to have a hard life in the situation she was in. And God took her from us earthly, but he saved her from a lifetime of hardship that we all would have and had to walk with her. And there's some way he saved her. And that's real belief, right? I mean, you've lost your daughter, and my wife is still standing on that. Like God saved her, even though he took her earthly body.
Yeah. And it's just been great to see how, because you can go one or two ways. You can either let this make you bitter, or you can lean into the pain and allow this situation to draw you closer to God. And that's exactly what I've seen Angie do, and it's exactly what I've seen you do. And I see the tears. I've been bitter. I know you have, but you work through it, and I think that's a natural result. Sometimes when you go through something like that you guys have been through, but you guys have worked through it, and you haven't stayed bitter. And so I commend you both for that. But Aric, I think what's interesting is you some of the most famous atheists in the world. I read something about Darwin, that it wasn't necessarily Darwinianism that and natural selection and that sort of thing that caused him to not have a belief in God. But I think this is true. I'm not exactly 100% sure, but he ended up losing, I think, a daughter. And that's what caused him to lose his faith. And there's other people, Hitchens and some of these more well-known atheists out there, that it was when they went through suffering is what caused them to become bitter and to walk away from their relationship with God and become these world-renowned atheists. And what I want to ask people, who go through that in a kind way is, what is atheism giving you to help you deal with the hardships and the trials in life? I mean, how in some sense is that working out for you? What resources, what promises, what truths does it offer you that you can hang your hat on and believe to help you get through the hard times of life. Because everybody's going to go through hard times. We're all going to face hard times. Each of us has a different journey. Each of us has a different race to run in life. Some of us have to run harder races than others. Let's be honest with you, right?
For sure.
We all have challenges because we live in a fallen world. We're all going to eventually die. We're all going to face physical challenges and relationship challenges. And so, is there a truth that is out there that we can rely upon, and it's going to help get us through those hard times? And I think Christianity has the answers to the problem that we face. And God promises those are the things that we can hang on to. His promises to us that He's going to be with us, that He loves us, that He's working all these things for our good. Those are the things that we hang on that helps to keep us from becoming bitter and helps us to persevere and to make it through the hard times in life.
I think that's fair. And for me, especially in Angie, and we always try to be very careful because we look forward to try to still have a wonderful life here, an earthly life, and to be able to enjoy our kids here on earth. So we still have 5 kids that are here on earth and maybe grandkids someday and all those things. But we're not going to be upset to be with Jesus, but to see Hallie again, right? Like for us, it's like, oh, that's when we get to be with her again. And if there is no Jesus, if there is no heaven, then Hallie's just gone.
Right.
And so we choose not to live that way because that's where the bitterness would come in. And it's like, well, God hated me and God took this. It's okay. Whatever God's done here, we don't understand. But if I continue to know Jesus and follow His promises, then we do get to be with Hallie again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it makes sense. You know, C.S. Lewis talked about this, that we invest all this time in building these relationships here on this earth. And we have these friends and close loved ones. Lewis talked about, does it just make sense that at death these things end and they don't continue? No, we were created that these relationships continue, and I think that they will in heaven. And so when we grieve, so the Bible says we grieve as people who have hope because we know the grave is not all there is. And I also want to say this. I really think, we have wrong views. I don't know where these views come from. Maybe it's media. I don't know. But we think of heaven as just being an unending church choir.
I don't think of it like that anymore. I don't.
A sing-along, and we don't really like the songs or that kind of stuff. Or I don't know, there's this baby floating on clouds kind of thing. And those images of heaven are not attractive to me at all. Okay.
I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out more, as much as I can, about heaven in the last year, which none of us really can, right? Because we don't know until we get there.
Yeah, the Bible doesn't tell us all we'd like to know.
Correct.
But it gives us enough of a glimpse.
And I've decided what you're saying. It's not babies in diapers with harps on clouds.
Right.
That's not what that is.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like heaven is more like the Garden of Eden, and it's bringing everything into a peaceful place, and God's just bringing it back here to earth, which the crossing has taught me over the last 15 years. And, heaven's going to come back to earth. And almost even this morning, Dave was preaching, and on this podcast, if you listen regularly, we talk about the crossing. We talk about Shay's wife, Lynn. We talked about John, her partner in their counseling. We talk about Dave. We talk about Shay. We never talk about Keith. I don't know why. We don't.
Maybe it's best we don't.
Keith's the third pastor. We never talk about Keith. We talk about Shay. We talk about Dave. And this morning, Dave he used a picture from the Bible Project on screen, and it was talking about how the Garden of Eden was kind of like a go-between heaven and the earthly world. The illustration that he had. So it was like Eden would have some of each. So you had Eden, but it had some of heaven and had some of the earthly world incorporated. And so if that's the case, that makes me feel more like maybe that's where heaven, like we die and we're in that transition point. This is, side note, there's nothing biblical about what I'm saying. This is just my own thought process over the last 12 months that I've been trying to figure out where my daughter's at.
Yeah.
Is like the Garden of Eden's there. It's still out there. And that's what Jesus is going to bring back to earth. It's just not time for it to be on earth yet. And so she's doing this, but it's not in clouds, and she's not dressed as she doesn't have angel wings where she's flapping them all out, all that stuff.
That's good. And we do know this. The Bible's pretty clear. When we die, obviously the body goes to the grave, right? But our soul, our spirit, if we're believers in Christ, we go to be with Jesus. And the passage that comes to mind is the penitent thief on the cross. Remember, Jesus dies between two thieves, and one asks Jesus essentially, hey, get us down from here. And so he goes to Jesus, wanting him for something. The other thief says, hey, this guy's done nothing wrong. He doesn't even deserve it. So he gets it. He understands it. And he turns to Jesus and says, remember me in your kingdom. And Jesus says to him, today you will be with me in paradise. Today. And so wherever that's at, we know that when someone dies, they go to be with Jesus, and that is a good thing. But what we would say is that the Bible also teaches that that's not the final heaven, so to speak. The new heaven and the new earth is going to come when Jesus comes back and restores this world, restores this earth. In some sense, it's going to be like back the Garden of Eden. And so everything that's wrong with this world, he's going to make right again. Yeah. And it's going to be made new. And we're going to get these resurrected bodies and these new bodies, and we're going to live with Jesus, and I think we're going to worship, and I think we're going to enjoy creation, and I think we're going to enjoy our relationships with one another. And I think we're really going to like being there, but no longer knowing disease and sickness and death and cancer and any of those things. And there's a couple, other things I want to say real quick to you, Aric, is in Revelation 20, it says when Jesus comes back, and it says in heaven, he's gonna wipe away every tear from our eyes. And I think it's a great promise to us that God's not only going to do away with all death and all mourning and all sickness, but that he knows us individually. He knows the hurts. He knows the trials that we go through, every tear that we shed. And Jesus is going to come and he's going to wipe those tears away because he knows us personally. He knows what we go through and the struggles that we have. And he's going to come and he's going to bring about healing in our lives. And I so look forward to that day. And that's why the book of Revelation it's to encourage us. It's saying, hey, have courage, keep going, because this is how the story ends. All that's been wrong with the world is going to be made right. But I want to say one other thing to you is I don't know where my own dad stood with the Lord. We had some good conversations, and he asked me, he said, Shay, how can I just put my faith in Christ before I die?
He's trying to play the lucky lottery ticket at the end.
Yeah, and I was like, well, Dad, first of all, you don't know how you're going to die. And my father actually was an alcoholic and ended up drinking himself to death. And I don't need to go into all that, but you never know how you're going to exit this world, right? But I said, Dad, your question presumes that the life that you're living now is the good life. But if you follow Jesus with your life, that he's going to make your life miserable. I said, you've bought into a lie. This idea that, well, I'll just accept Jesus on my deathbed and then go to heaven. And I go, yeah, that's a lie. You're assuming that following Jesus in the here and now is not for your good.
That was me, a conversation having your father.
It was.
As the son
but
to
it was
your
a good,
father.
Yeah, it was a good one. And after he died, we were cleaning out his apartment. And I found some things that I'd given him, that I saw some books that he had been marking up and reading and thinking about some of these things. And so you never know how you can plant that seed with them and what God might be doing in their life. But I don't know exactly where he stood with the Lord. But I do know this, Aric. If my dad is in heaven, I look forward to seeing him again. And I look forward to the time, I think in heaven we're going to eat, and I think that we're going to drink. And I look forward to spending time eating and drinking with my father and realizing that there's no longer addiction in his life. Because addiction takes you down that spiral and you become the person that you don't want to be, right?
It takes everything from you.
Yeah, it takes everything from you. And I want to know my dad free from addiction and that he's free from that.
Yeah.
And to spend time with him in that. And that he's no longer the person that alcohol had made him to be. I really look forward to that. And also we're gonna look forward to just being with Jesus. That's not going to be a scary thing.
Yeah.
But it's we were made for that relationship.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a good thing.
So a couple of things that we'll still touch on here then in that little bit of time that we have left. And one of it is, I didn't prep you with this. So if you need to think about it, you can. But as the only person that was with us in the room with Hallie at the very end. What was your, we've talked about as a family what that felt like, how that was. What did you witness? What was your take on that? Just watching our family go through those final moments. Blended family as well with the twins, with Hallie's dad, Lance, and Michelle, and all of us just being there together. And is there anything that stood out to you about those final moments?
Well, there's a couple of things that stand out, and real quick, I won't focus on this one, but just how important healthcare providers are and the level of expertise and care and love that the nurses and the doctors and all the people that were involved in that. I was just so impressed with how I'm sure not every hospital is like that, but those people. Our
nurses, Hallie and Bailey, they just cried with us, and they were so great for those 48 hours. And we've been in touch with them for the last year.
I'm so thankful for full-time hospital chaplains that are there for the people that work there in the hospital, but also to be there with families. So I just want to mention that. But, I watched your entire family in that room hug Hallie and care for her, and for her to, when we die, we all want to be surrounded by people who love us and who care for us. And you guys definitely demonstrated that there in that room. Your kids and you and Angie, and you were the ones that helped usher her into the arms of God. And I think for her to know that you were there with her and loved her and that she didn't need to fear, and especially to watch Angie in that moment was just that. I think that's if you're going to die, you want that kind of care, to be surrounded by loved ones. And you guys were faithful to love and care for your daughter. And so I commend you guys for that, even though I know that was so difficult.
Something I'm working through. I haven't really shared this with too many people. I don't know if I've shared with you. I'm pretty sure I've not shared this with Angie, so it would be the first time that she might hear this. I might have shared this with you. You've been in the room and seen many people pass, and it's sorrowful and lots of tears. I've seen it before. I've lost my father. I've lost grandparents, and I've never experienced. So you talk about things that live rent free in your mind, right? That you just can't get out of your head. And this is where I'm trying to work through. And maybe you and I, this is not something we're work through on this podcast. We work through it in our men's time at other times. But something that lives rent free in my head is the scream of a mother losing her child when they told her that, Mom, it's okay. She's breathed her last. That's a scream I can't. I hear that scream so often in my head.
Yeah.
And that's been really hard for me over the last year, because it just will pop up for no, and it just takes me right back to that minute. Now, what I should find in that is a happiness that in that moment, Hallie went to be with Jesus. That's what I'm trying to turn it into. But it's been really tough, right? To just hear my wife scream in my head over. And, she's lost her firstborn child. I've just never heard anything to that degree of.
And the grief, though, and the pain is real, and the grief is deep, and it's good. And that emotion and the sorrow and the loss and it's right, it's good, it's natural. Even though she's going to be with Jesus, it doesn't mean that it is not extremely painful. I'm reminded.
I wasn't sure if I should bring it up.
Right, Jesus, at the death of Lazarus, his friend, he grieved. Jesus wept. Jesus showed emotion. Jesus hurt at the loss. And so we have a God who knows what it's like to lose and to experience death. And then we also have a Father in heaven who's lost a son, right? And as Jesus goes to the cross. And so we have a God, right, who's with us and who identifies with us in our suffering. And that's what I'm preaching, I'm a pastor, but that's what makes Christianity is that Christianity offers the only religion where you have a God who suffers. No other religion has a God that suffers, who's become one of us, who's become flesh and bones, and who's got his hands dirty and has gone through everything that we go through in life, and who can identify with us. And that's one of the reasons why Christianity spread. It's one of the reasons why people who have suffered And the poor and those who've gone through hard times in life have been so attracted to it is because we live in this ethereal God that's just above everything, and we can't understand him and he can't relate to us. No, we have a God who, as we celebrate this Christmas season, who was God with us.
Yeah, I'm glad I asked. I wasn't sure I should ask that question or not, or bring it up even. But it's something I've struggled with. And for you to say that the grief is good, we forget that sometimes. I've looked, my own honesty, I've looked at the grief as a bad thing. And I do think it's why Angie has done such a great job, is she's owned in, she's gone deep into the grief, deep into the suffering. And I've gotten angry at the suffering, and I've tried to push the suffering away. And for you to say, it's good to grieve, I need to hear those words.
Those emotions are good. Yeah. I think that's an important part of the process. And I'll lighten the mood here a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
But
good.
If I can.
Go for it.
but there's a Christian comedian who a lot of people probably follow, and I forget his name.
Is it Trey Kennedy?
I know,
No.
but he was telling the story of Lazarus, and can you imagine? Because Jesus goes to Lazarus and heals him and brings him back from the dead, right? And this comedian tells a story of, can you imagine Lazarus? He dies. He's in heaven with God. And then he says, Peter knocks on his door and says, hey, we're going to have to send you back. And Lazarus going, wait a minute, I just got here. This is great. And you're telling me that I'm going to have to go back?
That's funny.
Yeah, it's kind of a special thing that Jesus is doing down there, and I just thought that was so funny. It was like, wait, I just got here, and now I got to go back. Yeah, really well done. But I don't know why I thought of that.
That's
but
funny.
I think once we're in heaven, we're going to want to stay.
Well, so we did go
a
month or so back, and we watched that movie, The Afterlife, or After. It's about all the experience of you die and you go be with Jesus, and then people were coming back.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to come back.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
I mean, literally, nobody wanted to come back. I mean,
Yeah.
they were a lot of zealots for Jesus after that. Like they were like, we did not want to come back to earth. Like,
and it's true. Remember, so Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, which was, but Lazarus had to die all over again, right? He eventually died again. And, and Jesus says to him, I am the resurrection and the life. And if you believe in me, you will never die. Right. And it points us to what we've been talking about here today. And that in him, we are forgiven. And I think we should long for heaven more than we do.
Yeah. I know that I do now.
Yeah.
Over the last year, I definitely do, for sure. I know Angie does too. Which brings us to our final point, because we are actually going a little long on time. We're going to pull one of those Lynn Roush 2 episodes if we don't watch it. We're kidding, Lynn. What we should do before I get to that point, because our wives aren't here to point us in the right direction, is that we've mentioned the podcast before, but Lynn and Shay and John, who we've talked about, we've mentioned their podcast, With You in the Weeds, is something that if people want to listen to, you guys do great work on topics of suffering and grief, and you're getting ready to do one on addiction. And Angie's been on with Lynn talking about narcissism and things like that. So it's a podcast that we've referenced before, but Shay is a part. If you're enjoying listening to Shay today and you want to hear more, you can check out With You in the Weeds on all the big platforms.
Appreciate the plug. Yeah. If we designed this podcast is because my wife's been a counselor for 15 years, and the other two people, John and Austin, are also counselors, and I'm the pastor. And, just what we're trying to do is to take the wisdom things we've learned over all these years, and to get it out to more and more people. So it's a little bit like you can become a fly on the wall, listening in on what we say when we meet with people and take people through counseling. And so our best marriage advice, our best parenting advice, our best wisdom on these issues, that's what we're trying to get out there to people, where you just don't have, if you don't want to go to counseling, hey, listen to our podcast, or if you can't.
I think it's very good. We listened to a lot of it on grief last year when you guys were doing that right after Hallie died. They were really good. And I was one of the people that wanted to call it 3 Shrinks and a Pastor. And I got overruled on that. I love it.
Walk into a bar.
Three shrinks and a pastor walk into a bar. But final question, Shay also he oversaw the celebration of life that we put together for Hallie. And that day you just talked about, as we get into the Christmas season, we're in it. I think it's applicable what you talked about that day and here. It's like sometimes we have to take a look at how we're living our lives to be with the ones that we love in heaven.
Yeah, how do we live? Solomon gives us wisdom in the book of Ecclesiastes, and he talks about funerals there. And he, essentially what he says is that a funeral makes a really good preacher. And what he means by that, and I've learned this, is when I do weddings, and I'm up there giving the homily, no one listens to what I have to say.
The bride looks great. Nobody cares.
Nobody needs marriage advice, obviously, because nobody wants to listen
to a blended family podcast right now.
and not that I like doing funerals, but I notice that people, when you do a funeral, people really do tune in and listen because, you're faced with the reality. This is going to be me someday, and there's going to be people standing up at my funeral and talking about me. And, what are they going to remember about you in your life? Is it going to be, well, he was just at the end of the day pretty selfish and just focused on himself and his toys and all of those kind of things? Or are they going to remember you? And Solomon says there are some things that are better to be remembered by than others. And I think one of those things is that we be people of character, that sometimes we can focus on the outside and just how we look, and we don't really deal with who we are as a person. I always tell people, make the most of every opportunity. You can't control everything in life, but focus on relationships with other people. Be good friends to people. Listen to them. Care for them. Be the kind of people that people around you can go to and find wisdom and that they can trust and have meaningful conversations. Be those kind of people. And then
sometimes those are hard conversations, but those
absolutely.
are the ones that really get us closer to Christ.
Sometimes as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. So sometimes the wounds of a friend are beneficial, right? Sometimes you got to say hard things because you are a friend and you love them.
You've never had to do that to me.
But an enemy, it says enemy multiplies kisses. So an enemy tells you what you want to hear.
She's never been shy to tell me when I needed to hear something.
Because I love you.
I know.
And so be that kind of friend to other people. And then I also always want to say, when it comes to how we live, is we're not put here that just the world revolve around us, but we're put here for a reason, and that is to serve other people and to love other people and really cherish the relationships that you have. And I know this time of season we're reminded many times as broken families and families that can't get along, but work to forgive as best you can. Work hard to work through issues. Don't let things come between you, because relationships get broken and there's just so much heartache when families are broken. I've experienced that in my own family, and you just miss those people. And so hug your family, hug your kids close. Don't waste the opportunities. Be involved in their lives. Be present in their lives. Enjoy those relationships because they won't be forever.
Yeah. Last question we have to ask. I'm interested to see what you say. I already know what your wife's answer is, but what's your favorite family tradition? We ask every guest that we have what their favorite family tradition is. You probably just say what your wife said. It'll be fine. We've adopted your family tradition because of your wife, actually.
Oh, yeah. She probably mentioned that Thanksgiving, where we like to go around. Well, we do this at Thanksgiving. We go around and, like a lot of families, just what are we thankful for? But also, when we celebrate birthdays and we go out to eat, is we have everybody go around and just share what they appreciate about that person. And it gets our kids, you know how kids are.
That's the best part, is seeing their kids, the siblings say what they like about their sibling. Because you don't get that often, right?
Yeah. I thought you were going to mention my wife. She, every year on our anniversary, she wants to go out and do dinner and do a State of the Union discussion about how things are going in the marriage relationship. And so I don't know if you
that was not where I was going.
Have adopted that.
No, we adopted your tributes on birthdays. So it's the twins' 15th birthday. We'll be doing that later today.
Yeah. So I've got the State of the Union coming up here, December 27th, and as we'll be married 26 years. But
do you ever get to have part in the State of the Union, or does Lynn do all the? She just lets you know how it's going.
No comment.
Okay. All right. Well, as I said at the beginning, Shay is a great friend that I have said I hope that I die before Shay so that he can walk me into the arms of Jesus. I've said, and I mean that. I mean, with all sincerity. I mean, Shay's older than me, so I mean, I'm going to have to go young, right? And but I do hope that I go first so that Shay will walk me into the arms of Jesus the way that he did Hallie, the way that he has done so many. And just appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today, Shay.
Been great being with you, Aric. Love you.
I love you too, buddy. And I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too.
And again, With You in the Weeds, which is a podcast through the Crossing Church, and you can find it on Spotify, Apple, all the different places, and it's really good. So if you're looking for some counseling help, you're going through a hard time, then you can check that out as well. We hope that, as always, you guys have an absolutely wonderful week, and God bless.
Thank you for listening to Blended Blessed and Always a Mess. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at blendedblessedalwaysamess.com.
Reach out to us on any of our social channels. We would love to hear from you. Have a great week.